Hello and welcome to Video Revealed. I'm Colin Smith. Let's look at the confusing speed controls in Adobe Premiere Pro. All right, they're only confusing if you don't know which one to use. You're not meant to use all of them. There are many places to change the speed, and that really is useful because depending on the job, you'll choose different controls. The first one I want to show you is the speed of the clip itself. Every clip that you import has a frame rate, and that is the frame rate that is saved with the file. It's easy to be confused when you change the frame rate and it changes the speed of the clip. Okay, so let's look at these two clips here. So this one is in real time. This one is super slow motion. So for this clip here, if we look at that in the project panel, it's this one here. And if you go to modify, interpret footage, you'll see the frame rate of the file. It's 25 frames a second. And if you change it to something else, it's going to change the speed. So if I change this to, let's say, 50 frames a second, click OK, you'll see a bunch of these lines show up, and that means the clip is now ends here. This is where it used to end, and you can change that, change that by trimming that back and then trimming it there. So at 50, it's twice as fast. So if you want to change the speed, that's one way to change the speed. You're interpreting the footage, and it changes the footage on the timeline for every location of that instance. I'm just going to put that back. So let's look at the next one here, which is this super slow, very slow motion, long clip of this drift. And I believe it's that one there. So I'll right click, modify, interpret footage. It's also 25. Well, this is stock footage on Artgrid. And this particular videographer obviously shot some of this footage at a very high frame rate camera, and then they uploaded it at 25 frames a second because it's probably easier for anyone buying this clip that they drop it in and they saw it as slow motion. If you want to speed this up, so if I click in here and let's change this to 75 frames per second, click OK, the clip gets shorter and now the speed is faster. So interpreting the footage is not wrong or right, it's just another way to change the speed. Most times I will use this if the speed that is set in the file is incorrect. And this happens all the time with smartphone footage. It's just the wrong frame rate, and I'll change the frame rate. I wouldn't use that to change the speed unless it's the clip itself. Like if that's the most important thing, I want the clip itself to change. If I want to create an artistic change in the timeline, something stylistic or speeding up and slowing down, then I'll use the tools in the timeline. The next one is the rate stretch tool, and this is what most people will use. So let me get rid of this clip here, and we'll just go back to this one. So that's real time. And if you wanted that slower, in your tools, by the way, I'm using the Essentials workspace. In the tools here, if you click and hold, you can get to the rate stretch tool. It's also the R key. And if you go to the edge of a clip and drag it out, you'll see the duration is changing down at the bottom. So now this is a slower clip. But it's also jerky. It's not smooth, it's jerky. That's because Premiere Pro is filling in all of the frames, and it's actually filling it in with duplicates, which is not really what you want when you're slowing things down. If you want super slow-mo, then my suggestion, you got two suggestions, and they're not Adobe suggestions. One is free, it's on Windows, it's called Flow Frames. I'll put the tutorial I have in the description. And the other is Twixtor. That's really the industry standard for changing speed. So the rate stretch tool I mean, sometimes some people just use it to squeeze a clip a little shorter or a little faster to fit things in. I hardly use it at all, but it is an option. Now, the other one is right-clicking and choosing speed. And what you can do is choose Command R, Control R to get you to speed. So you can see the speed here is 100%. What if I grab the rate stretch tool and drag this out? Right-click and choose speed. You can see the two are connected. So the rate stretch tool and then right-clicking, changing speed duration are definitely connected. When you change one, it changes the other. When you choose modify interpret footage, it does not change this setting here. It's really, and you could change both of them. You could change it in modify and you could change it with the rate stretch tool. I don't recommend it. It's better for you to change the speed where you want it to change. So you can change the speed there, you can reverse the speed, and you can ripple so that as you're changing this, all the rest of the clips are moving on the timeline. And I've got a whole tutorial about working with optical flow. Optical flow works hardly ever, but when it does, it works great. This is the alternative to flow frames or Twixtor. It works sometimes. So I'll go back to 100% on there. Okay. So that's multiple ways to change it. Now let's look at time remapping, and I'm going to delete this clip and I'll go back to a clip. It's the same drift clip, but I've got a speed ramp going on there. Now, the reason the super slow motion looks good in this clip is because it was shot that way. I could super slow-mo any clip, but it would now be doing that jerky clip. I picked this one because I'm not slowing it down, I'm actually speeding it up at the beginning. Now, you have to be able to see these settings first. And in the wrench, you have to have this on. Show video keyframes. If you don't, you won't see a thing. So click on the wrench, turn on show video keyframes in case that's hidden, and right click and change it from opacity. That's the default. It's always set by default on opacity. Any effect you have applied can be keyframed in the timeline this way, but I'm going to choose time remapping speed. And you can see I've got a setting here and I've got a setting here. And I've got this gradual change over here. I'm going to show you how to do this from scratch. I also wanted to show you in the effects controls that the effects show up in here. So you can't change these in here. They're just meant as reference. You can click and move this around and you can select these and delete them. So you can do a little bit of editing, but the actual ramping is done in the timeline. And you can change the size of this. It really does make sense. If you're trying to do ramping, it's too small. You can drag this all the way up and now your ramp is really big and easier to see. So if I get rid of all of this, so I'll select all of this and delete it. And now we're back to a fast speed. That's because it kept the first speed, which was 1,000. So you can see that's changing there. And sometimes it's just easier to delete the clip and just bring it in again. All right. Now it's going slow the whole way. Sometimes those controls, especially when you're 1,000% and you're dragging that gosh darn thing along, it's a pain. Okay, so let me go back to time remapping speed. There we go. So I want this to start faster and then go slower. So you hold the Control key on Windows, Command key on Mac, and click in the time remapping keyframe. If you've accidentally turned speed off, so this stopwatch, although there are no keyframes, it's blue. If it's not blue, you can't click in the timeline. So go back and click on it. I had this problem when I was messing around with things and I had changed things so many times, I actually turned that off. Oops. So I'll click around here and I'll drag this up And I'll keep dragging. So it's at 97700. So that's the fastest I could go. And then I'll drag this keyframe wide. And now you've got a bit more control of where this goes, fast to slow. And if you click in the middle of these, you'll get these little handles, and you can set how quickly the speed changes from one to the other. Now it's a little bit slower from there to there. There we go. You can come in here and change these here. You can change them there. I could ramp it again back over here. If you hold the control key on Windows, command key on Mac, you'll actually go backwards. So now this is going to go backwards when it gets there and then forwards. So you can do lots of crazy things. Now these controls here, if you open this up, if you move over here, you can change the size of this. These controls here are not for changing any of the speed. They're strictly for helping you to scale this area to see it. So when you make a change, this button turns off, but when you click on this, this is toggle automatic, so it automatically scales. It's just for your view while you're editing this, because you can make this very, very large. I've seen some people in that time remapping actually have multiple keyframes and have a very complex set of keyframes for time remapping. So you can do that in here. Oh yeah, one other thing is this gosh darn bug. So if I change this size, sometimes this doesn't change and you need to just, yeah, see those didn't show up? They only showed up when I started wiggling this around. Those keyframes on the right-hand side only showed up after I go into the middle and wiggle this around. So there you go. There's no wrong or right. It's what do you want to do? What kind of changes do you want to do? You want to just use the rate stretch tool or the speed changes and just change it on the timeline? You want to interpret the footage, or you want to do speed ramps with time remapping? It's totally up to you. I would suggest you check out the flow frames example because it blows optical flow away. There's no errors. It's incredible. It's a free solution. It's Windows only. But hey, if you've got a project to do, maybe you can find a Windows user to do a conversion. Or Twixtor. It's a third-party paid solution, but it also will do a much better job with optical flow. Hey, if you're new to Video Revealed and you found this informative, take a moment and subscribe. Come on, please. It means a lot to us. If you want to support us some more, you can do it on our website, videorevealed.com/shop. Donate once or monthly, any amount. We love our wonderful donors. You folks are amazing. Oh, we love you. Thank you for keeping this channel going. It really does matter to us. Until next time, I'm Colin Smith, and it's my job to look at 4 or 5 different ways of doing things and then realize, you know what? It'd be good to combine all of these together to help people understand all the different ways you can make speed changes in Adobe Premiere Pro.